Yep, ready to go. Here we are. Good. Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Citizens Communication Council. Our first piece of business this evening is to elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary for the council. Are there any nominations for chair?
I nominate Art Hartel, Radnor Studio 21.
Okay.
I second that nomination.
We can take a vote on that, or we can nominate the whole slate. I would nominate Brian Kirby as vice chair and John Ricciuti as secretary.
I second Brian Kirby. John Ricciuti. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments to make? If not, we'll take a vote on the officers that have been nominated. All in favor of the officers? We go one at a time if you'd like. For chair?
Aye.
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 And I too. Vice chair for Brian Kirby, yay.
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 Okay. And Brian is, and secretary, John Ricciuti. Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Good evening. How are you? Come join us. It's okay. You're here just in time. We have some new business which we will get into in our new business section of our meeting. But we'll go through the agenda as proposed. The first report is from Vince Celli, who is the new general manager at Radnor Studio 21. Vince has just recently joined in that capacity in February and has been quite active since he came on board. Vince, do you want to bring us up to date on what's happening with Channel 21?
Would love to. As Art said, I was hired on February 5th to be the general manager of Radnor Studio 21. I've provided a list of basically everything I've been going through since February. Some of the items I wanted to review was that one of my priorities when I came on was visiting with all 7 commissioners, visiting with Bob, visiting with his staff, visiting with a lot of people who are essential to running Radnor, and I was able to do that, and it opened up a lot of doors for me in a lot of senses. In addition, I have met with Mike Petiti of the school district. We've had a couple meetings where we're talking about possibly moving towards working together in the future. And some of the highlights over the last 5 months, 170 days, I've listed here. I've forged a lot of relationships with a variety of organizations here in Radnor, and they've all been working fantastically with me and working with me to create content and programming at Radnor Studio 21. Since February, we have Radnor Studio 21 has created 110 30-minute studio sessions. We've done 26 news/event programs of things going on in and around Radnor and Lower Merion. And we've recruited 13 new independent producers who are going to be creating content in conjunction with Radnor Studio 21. I've listed at the bottom of the page, I've listed all the different events that we've done here in Radnor and Lower Merion. But these were more news-style stories, normally 5 to 10-minute stories that were shot in the field as compared to the studio. The initiatives moving forward, I came from Delaware State University, where I was the Director of Technology for the Department of Mass Communications. And we were working with updated technology. We were able to stream on a regular basis all the events, all the sporting events. We were able to go live to our YouTube and to various other places that we could feed a live stream to. One of the things I suggested, and it might be why the board thought I was a good fit, was my experience with streaming and my desire to bring streaming here to Radnor Township. I think there's nothing like mom and dad, grandmom and grandpa wanting to see their kids playing sports or taking part in activities in the community. I think we can do that if we upgrade our technology to include streaming at Radnor Studio 21. I also think we need to, what I'm calling rebirth Radnor Studio 21. Part of that is giving a new logo. Part of that is possibly a new name instead of Radnor Studio 21. Part of that is also moving from where we are now, which is the second level of 110 West Lancaster, to a lower level that's become available to us. That area is more conducive to an office type setting, an educational type setting, because ideally what we're supposed to be doing is we're supposed to be teaching other public people who want public access on how to create content. So the move to the lower level would be something that would be beneficial and would give us a great reason to actually rebirth the studio more. And if we rebirth, we can get more people to know about Radnor Studio 21. Other items that we're looking at, I have rewritten but continually keep picking at Radnor Studio 21's policies and procedures. So that's probably going to be another 6 months before we get it to a point where the whole board is comfortable with what we're proposing. And I'm just now getting into finding avenues to seek outside support and funding for our station. One of the things we really need is to be able to acquire data, viewing data and information from Verizon and Comcast. And with the help of the board, we might be able to find a way to actually get some information that will allow us to go out and actually sell Radnor Studio 21. Questions?
Brian?
You mentioned the interest in bringing streaming, and you mentioned in your report here, you talk about the technology that's required for that. I mean, what kind of technology are you talking about, and at what kind of cost would you be looking at, ballpark, in terms of upgrading the technology at the studio to allow streaming?
I've already put a package together. I've priced a package, and we could do the minimum that would be required to actually get up and running with, for example, a 4-camera streaming setup where we could go into a gymnasium, we could go to a football field with 4 cameras. Minimum, it's about $25,000.
Any other questions? Vince, thank you very much.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
I just have a question regarding the streaming of sporting events. I know that a lot of the sporting events, especially football that you mentioned, soccer and lacrosse, have video already being done from the school district. Have you guys reached out to, just try to coordinate repurposing those tapes for the television, because they already exist?
You mean the existing video? Excuse me? You mean the existing video? Of
The existing
games?
videos for streaming, yeah, because I know they hire some pretty top-notch companies to do the videos of the games.
Putting them on our channel, that wouldn't be a problem, but actually being there so that we could get the signal out live, that's what we're looking towards. I've had meetings with Mike Petiti.
Because
and
I know it's happening on Twitter and other mediums.
Let me interject quickly. For those that don't know me, I'm Michael Petiti. I'm the Director of Communications for Radnor School District. So thank you for inviting me to this meeting. This is my first ever experience sitting in on one of these meetings, so to be at the dais already is a little bit of a surprise, but I'm happy to be here and happy to participate. Vince and I have met, and we talked about those exact concerns. So I do want to pump the brakes a little bit on the excitement around streaming of our sporting events. There's a lot more that goes into the ability to bring cameras onto our sidelines than just opening the doors. We have to make sure of privacy concerns and that our parents and students are aware of it and that there's safety measures put into place and that we're all comfortable with what's going on in terms of streaming live from events that are being participated in by teenagers and young adults. So before we can get to the point of reaching that, let's live stream district events, and Vince and I, we've talked about this. We can always attempt this on events that don't have to do with the school district. So whatever the township happens to be doing that could be live streamed, Vince and the township are certainly able to go about doing that. And we can maybe work towards getting Vince and the live streaming capabilities on our sidelines in a partnership. But of course, there's going to be a lot of things we have to get in place first before we can reach that end goal.
And the first step really is a technology, because it's very specific technology. My experience is, as I said, I was at Delaware State University, and I was able to get Title III grants because Delaware State University was an HBCU. We actually had a 20-foot streaming trailer, which allowed us to live stream video, not only from different locations on the campus, but we could actually travel with the different teams to different cities and set up to stream the video back to the campus. So there's a lot of possibilities, but the first step is really, you're not going to be able to do any of that without having the technology in hand.
I would also respectfully say that the second step, if not 1B, is making sure that all the ducks in a row with the school district and all of the issues going around, making sure that the community understands the partnership and everything. So I do want to make the expectations in place right here that the streaming of our games is not a goal, immediate priority in terms of happening soon for us at the district, at least at this time. I don't want the streaming or the approval of whatever equipment you may need to purchase to make this happen be contingent upon getting on our sidelines. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Vince.
Thank you.
Jim, I welcome you up to give you the report on the government access.
Great, thank you. My name is Jim Doling. I think just about every one of you guys know me now. I'm the Cable Web and Communications Coordinator for the Township. One of my duties is to oversee the government access channel, which we call Radnor Television or RTV. I am full-time with the Township. There's also a part-timer named Ian Myers who works with me as well. The number one thing RTV does is we broadcast, like tonight, all the live meetings, all the meetings that happen here. We broadcast over 168 meetings each year. And then we do replay them as well, too. We also produce original programming. We have Radnor 411, which is a monthly update from all the township departments. We do 30 Minutes with the Manager, which is an interview-style show with the township manager, which is 30 minutes long. We have Radnor Health Matters, which is produced by the Radnor Township Board of Health. And then we also do a program, Radnor 911, which is produced by the police departments. Basically, that equates to over 5,700 hours of meetings and original programming that we broadcast on the channel. We also have an electronic bulletin board with slides and pictures and brief videos, which tells about upcoming meeting dates and any township news, information, or events and current happenings in the township.
Jim, do you have some regular schedule for your broadcast of the special programs such as the township manager and the 911, 411, so that if somebody were looking specifically to see that, they would know what time or to go to see that? Or is that just random?
No, we do have a schedule. We have a set schedule just for the live meetings, the replays of the meetings. You can find it on the channel itself, the scroll that goes, there are slides that talk about that and give the schedule of upcoming shows, as well as on our website under the Radnor Television section of the Township website. You can see the schedule as well, too.
Okay. Any other questions?
What are the channel numbers for Verizon and for Comcast?
For Comcast, we're on channel 5, and for Verizon, we're on channel 30.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. The next one is a presentation by the Educational Channel. Since you're the only one that's here, would you like to say a few words based upon what you're doing at the township with regard to the Educational Channel?
Sure. So as a district, we've actually taken over the past year through our Communications and Government Relations Committee of the school board, an initiative to study video offerings in the district. So it's been going on for some time. Initially, it started off by how do we want to start streaming our committee meetings. So currently, our committee meetings are streamed on our website via a service called MediaCast. We wanted to start doing it via YouTube. This is much more accessible. We all know how to use YouTube. So it began, and also we want to make sure we can get closed captioning in place for those that may need closed captioning, and it's much more accessible on mobile devices, et cetera. So in the process of moving to YouTube to stream, which we're happy to start doing in August, our plan is to start streaming on YouTube, on our new YouTube channel in August, so next month. We learned just how much our video needs to evolve in the district and the things that we need to do to take our video to the next level in terms of producing for mobile, our TV channel, we're channel 8 and 31. It's run out of the high school, and those who may not know that, it's run out of Radnor High School, our TV station. And so Nikki Crone is our TV director. She's been at the high school for about 20 years. More, and she runs a club called Rad TV, and that's kind of what our station has been known as for some time, Rad TV. Well, we're taking a look at Rad TV, and we're taking a look at the club, and we're also taking a look at the video production class that we offer at the high school, and how can we get those students more involved in the productions that go on our channel. So it just so happens that we're right smack in the middle of doing this study. We're actually in the middle of a survey right now, surveying our past video production students and our current students who have participated in making videos at the high school, and what they might want to participate in, and what classes they might want to see, and how they might want to get behind the camera and in front of the camera. And through that process, we met with Vince, and we talked about how we could partner perhaps with Radnor 21 to get live streaming going, perhaps not as soon as, you know, Vince may like or the township might like, but we want to get there. And so the good news is we're taking a close look at the programming, and in the meantime, we still offer stuff that was produced over the past year, including graduation footage and original footage from our students that created, senior prom, et cetera. So I encourage everyone to watch and stay tuned for even better things from our channel.
Good, thank you. Any questions?
Yes, is that 8 on Comcast and 31 on Verizon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Jill, you had a question?
What are your plans for your high-def channel?
So as I understand it, it looks like we're going to be getting into that a little bit later, perhaps. The Comcast situation is pertinent around excuse me, our HD capabilities, as well as if we can be on demand. So if you can actually go and watch the prom whenever you want. And also, I know this answers more than you might have asked, but also you're not able to see what's on the program. So there's no TV guide that says, you know, click on this channel to see a prom. It just says educational programming. So all those things, I believe, are part of what we're talking about with Comcast, if I'm not mistaken.
So you have plans to use your high-def equipment and broadcast in high-def?
We're already able to record in high def, and the issue isn't our equipment or the ability for us to broadcast in high def. We could broadcast in 1080p on YouTube or higher resolution on YouTube. It's I believe, and I'm not as technically familiar with it all, but I believe we don't have the ability because we don't have an HD channel that's offered to us to broadcast on.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Next on our agenda is a report from Comcast. We have two lovely ladies here to present with Comcast. John?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Boyette. I'm Government Affairs at Comcast. I'm the manager. I don't really have anything new to talk about today, other than I do like to stress again our Internet Essentials program. Since we're getting into back-to-school season, we offer the Internet at $9.95 a month for families with kids in free and reduced school lunch or who are in public housing or on housing assistance. So we like to remind everybody of that as we go back into the school year. And there will be some enhancements to the program this year. Those announcements are coming out in August. So keep an ear out, and I will send an email around with the press release so that everybody's aware of it, especially the school district with the kids. But I did want to introduce Caitlin Ganley. Sorry, I have a cough today, so I'm on a cough drop here. Sorry about that. But Caitlin Ganley is the new Senior Director of Government Affairs at Comcast. She is taking over for Kevin Broadhurst, who I'm sure a lot of you remember. Kevin moved on to another job within Comcast and moved to the Beltway region, to the DC area. So Caitlin also works with me now, and you can talk to either one of us if you have issues or concerns. So Caitlin, do you want to come up and just talk about your background a little bit?
Thank you for having me here tonight. As Jen mentioned, I'm new to Comcast. I've only been with the company since October, but either Jen or I can be of any service to you. You know, any of the issues regarding your PEG channels or residents that have issues with Comcast, you can send them to either Jen or I, and I'll make sure that everybody has my contact information before we leave tonight.
And Jim already knows me. He contacts me often, so you guys know how to find me.
Okay. Anybody have any questions of Comcast?
Yeah, just back to the HD question. Do you see high-def channels in Radnor's future, either as a PE or G in the channels?
We currently do not offer any PEG channels in HD. It's just our system is not able to do it. But it is in the future. It is coming down the tracks, I'd say 3-4 years on the bright side, or the best case scenario there. But it is coming down the road. Everybody broadcasts in HD, as you know, so we are trying to catch up and have those capabilities.
Thank you. Any other questions? Good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I have a question for Comcast. Do you anticipate in the future having a lower third that would include for what the viewer would be seeing instead of, as Michael pointed out, government access? Radnor Studio 21 has a diversified, educational, informative, and entertaining audience viewership, and sometimes the viewer doesn't get to see who's on. Is that somewhere in your future plans?
You said lower third, but you're talking about a guide channel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because lower third would be
Yeah.
the graphic on the screen.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't do that.
You don't?
No.
I'm sorry, you don't do that.
I'm sorry, we don't do that.
Okay.
But I will run it up to the bosses again and see if it's something we can add. We get that question here and there from other PEG channels as well, so you're not the only ones who ask.
Is that a different company that does that?
No,
It's just not done?
right.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian.
I was just in following up to the Radnor 21 presentation and the idea of acquiring audience data and demographics from Comcast. Is that something that's feasible in terms of getting or, providing that data?
Yes and no. It's also part of our franchise negotiations, which we don't talk about in public. So while we're still working on the contract, we'll refrain from answering that question.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And now we have a report from Verizon. Mary? Jan? Ms. Miller?
Good evening. My name is Janet Miller. I'm the Verizon Franchise Service Manager. As with Comcast, I don't have anything particular to report, but I'm open to any questions you may have.
Might as well ask the guide question.
At the current time, the technology of our system does not allow us to program the guide for PEG stations. The programming comes in one location, and the guide comes in a different location, and it's not compatible.
Is the guide provided by a third-party company?
I can't answer that. I don't know that information.
Could you ask and get back to us?
Certainly.
I guess I can also ask the same question I just asked Comcast. As far as Radnor 21 had expressed interest in getting audience data and demographics and whatnot, is that something that Verizon is in a position to provide that information with respect to viewers of PEG channels?
Vince had asked me that question before the meeting. I don't know if we can get viewer information on a channel-by-channel basis. If we were to do it, it would be under a confidential seal. But I agreed that I would look into that and get back to you and him.
And the question on high def?
We do
availability?
not offer, as Comcast, any PEG channels in Pennsylvania in HD format. Whether or not that's something that we're looking at in the future, I'm not aware of that, but I also offered Vince to look into that
Okay,
and get back to you.
please, thank you very much.
Janet, I'll ask you the same question I asked Comcast. Do you have cumulative numbers of viewership?
I think that's what I was just speaking about. I'm sorry.
If Brian asked you the same question, then I apologize.
I don't know we can get it on a channel-by-channel basis. So I don't know that we can tell you how many viewers are watching the public access, the government access, or the educational access channel. Are you speaking more broadly in terms of subscribership?
Is it something you just don't keep track of?
I don't know if we keep track of it on a channel-by-channel basis, is my answer. But I agreed that I would look into it and see whether or not it can be gathered.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So, when I see it on the screen, the guide, it's just one long line, right, that says government access programming.
Yes.
Would there be a way to potentially not label it as the name of the program, but chop up the line so that if somebody wanted to record just a half an hour or just an hour-long program, they could select that period of time as opposed to having to select the entire string of, guide? What I'm trying to say?
I don't know the answer to that either. It's a technical question, which I will I'll refer to the PEG engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's nothing else,
Nope,
I'd
we're
like
good.
to leave, if you don't mind.
No? Safe trip back to Harrisburg?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome, thank you. Oh, and Jim has my contact information. He knows me well also, and I can refer anything internally that I can't handle.
That'd be great. Thank you. Old business is, first item of old business, proposed Comcast renewal agreement. I have no information on that at this time. Hopefully, we can bring information forward shortly. New business,
Can I just
I'm
clarify on that? I just want to make sure I'm correct. Is that agenda item referencing the
franchise agreement.
two-year-long process that started in October 2016 with the audit that was done of our studios?
No,
No. Okay, so we're not talking about that this evening?
no,
Okay, thank you.
no. The next item is the discussion of the emergency communications. I'm going to ask the township manager, Bob, if you could give us some background on this so that we can get the issue before the committee and then determine how we can best help the township resolve the issues if there are issues that need to be resolved.
Sure. This has been an item that I know in several particular areas of the township, we have emergency communication issues in which we have had problems for emergency services being able to communicate back to Delcom. We have dead zones in the township, and we have been looking at solutions to resolve those communication issues. We've looked at cellular communication issues to try to resolve these, and utilizing
The 18 years I've been here, that's the first, by the way.
There's nothing,
and, well, that's a tough one to follow.
there's nothing like live TV.
No, there
So,
isn't.
You can understand why we want to get to streaming on some of
Yes.
our programs.
So we have had emergency communications concerns in several areas. We've looked at cellular communications as an option to resolve the issue, which would. We've looked at the option of large antennas to be able to solve the issues. We've looked at fiber optics to resolve the issues. We've looked at microcells to resolve the issues. Some of the options are very expensive to the township, which we did not pursue. Some are not feasible to resolve the issues, so we're kind of at a standstill now. The biggest concerns are life safety issues, also putting our safety forces in dangerous situations now because they cannot communicate. So the concern is bringing it to this board to look and discuss options to consider. Now that the board has prohibited cellular towers to be placed in any park areas, so it's now options to be looked at. We have done studies looking at what we can do. So we've put about 7.5 years of research study into this to come up with options. None have been approved, so we are kind of back at square one now. So we are now looking to bring this in front of you to begin a process to see what we can actually do and work with you on this.
What would be helpful then for us would be to have you share with us the studies that you've done. At least we can have a starting point to understand what the criticalness of the situation is, and then help resolve a pathway to some solution going forward. So if you could provide that information to us, that would be a starting point for us to take a look at.
What I can do is give you a little snapshot. Steve Giancristofaro, who works with the township here on a part-time basis, is one of our experts. Steve also worked with Delaware County, has a vast knowledge and experience in this particular area. Maybe Steve will give you a kind of a quick overview of this and his expertise on this, so if the
Please,
committee would allow
Steve,
some.
would you want to take, are you all right from there?
I'm fine here, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Giancristoforo. As Mr. Z says, I'm part-time here as an IT specialist in the township. I recently retired 2 months ago from Delaware County Emergency Services after serving for 40 years there. I retired after working 10 years there as their communication systems manager, meaning that I was responsible for the radio infrastructure throughout Delaware County for the police, fire, and EMS system. I think the best way to sum this all up is to describe how the system works and the correlation between emergency radio systems and cell systems. The county operates a 500 megahertz T-band system. It's analog. It works on transmitters and receivers spread throughout Delaware County. There's approximately 400 to 500 pieces of equipment out there spread out throughout all the sites. Now, the system that we utilize for police and fire is a duplex system. In other words, there's transmit frequencies and there's also different frequencies that receive back. In Radnor Township, there's two transmitters that operate, two transmit sites that operate in the township. One's on the roof of Radnor House condominiums at 1030 East Lancaster, and the other one's right beside us here at 301 Ivan. The transmitters are in very high locations and are very powerful, so there's only two of them needed to cover the entire township. The problem is not the officers hearing Delcom or Fireboard. The problem is the officers talking back to Delcom and Fireboard. The transmit out is a very powerful signal that comes from the county. The receive back, though, the officers, if they're outside their vehicle, or the fire officers, the EMS people are outside their vehicles, are using portable radios to transmit back. So when they transmit back, like say they're either in Willows Park or Ithan Valley or right out here in front of 301 Ivan, they're not transmitting from wherever they're standing all the way back to the 911 center, which is in Middletown Township. They're transmitting to the local receiver site. Now, in Radnor Township, there's 4 receiver sites spread throughout the township. So there's, on a duplex system, there's always many, many more receivers than there are transmitters. The problem, when we went out in 2016, it was July of 2016, I was working for the county then, and I went out with Radnor's radio vendor, who was RMI, and we went out, we identified the worst spots in the county, in the township here, as far as talk back, as far as receive capability for receiving the fire, police, and EMS portables. And we found that the Willows and Ithan Valley Park were two of the areas that were in dire need of receiver equipment to be able to communicate from the officers back to the county. So we did radio tests, and the majority of the radio tests using a portable radio were basically not able to be heard at all by the county. If so, it would just be sporadic. So we went and documented these tests. I put a presentation on back in 2016 to the Board of Commissioners and the Parks Board and everything, and I don't think it's got much traction since then, but the problem, and also in these two areas, there's negligible cell phone coverage. So cell phone coverage is almost nil in these same areas. To be able to provide talkback coverage in those two areas, you would need an antenna of substantial height, at least 100 feet, 125 feet, where you'd be able to put an antenna in a high place. Now, cell towers, there are locations in Delaware County where emergency services equipment co-locates on a cell tower. And how it normally works, and again, I can't speak for Delaware County because I'm no longer employed there, I'm retired from there, but how it has worked in the past is that if the township or an entity decides to erect a tower in an area that has spotty radio coverage, the agreement is made where public safety would have the top 20 or 25 feet of that tower for their use. And either the township and or the county would have that equipment installed and use that height to be able to provide talkback coverage back to the county. And what would happen is that the tower would go up, the equipment would be installed. The equipment is usually provided by the county or provided by the township if it's a township radio channel, and the township does have a radio channel that they use on a regular basis here. And then the wire line, either Verizon T1 line or RTNA circuits, are then installed, which carries that signal from that tower site back to wherever the main site is for that. Here for Radnor TAC, it's right outside here, 301 Ivan. Or for the county, it would be back to the 911 center in Middletown Township. So when you're talking emergency communications, height is everything. The higher you go, the better coverage you're going to get, obviously. A rooftop unit at the Willows Mansion is not going to be ideal because it's not going to cover the entire area that you need it covered. So this is what I presented back in 2016, and we actually had recordings and photographs and so forth, and actually did the studies. Ithan Valley Park was really bad. I mean, you couldn't even get a cell phone call there, either call out or receive back, or the Willows was extremely bad also. So that's the history that I was involved in back then. And like I say, with receiver sites, height is everything. The higher you go, the more you're going to be able to provide talkback coverage to the county, which is critical. Okay?
How much area or does a callback site need? In other words, if I put one up here, what's the area that I can effectively make a callback?
Good question. It all depends on the topography. It depends on the buildings. Usually a 100-foot or 125-foot high tower in a relatively flat area will get you 4 to 5 miles of talkback coverage. But depending on the hills and valleys and so forth and how many trees are around, these all have big-time implications on cutting down the amount of talkback coverage. So because of all the hills and valleys at the Willows area, you're going to need something pretty high to be able to cover all that.
How about Ithan Park?
Ithan Park sits down in a gully, and you're going to need something pretty high to be able to project out. And also, Ithan Valley Park would be great for I-476 for our fire departments. Although the police departments here, Radnor Police does not cover 476, it's covered police jurisdiction is Pennsylvania State Police, but for the fire company, they do. So to provide adequate fire EMS coverage for not only the Ithan Valley Park area, but I-476, a tower located adjacent to 476 in Ithan Valley Park would be ideal. And again, I can't commit to the county doing that because I'm no longer there, but I'm just saying hypothetically back in 2016, that's what I presented.
So what you presented, just so I understand, for the discussion tonight, we're going to have to get into this a little deeper, but for tonight at least, you were proposing a 125-foot tower located in the Willows?
Yeah, behind the Willows, yes.
Okay, there's a small area right behind the house
Yes.
that's available for that, or at least was available at one
And
time.
even years ago, we proposed it up the hill a little bit also.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And then where were you proposing for Ithan?
In Ithan Valley Park, right adjacent to 476.
Is that on, who has that land? Who
That's
has-
township property.
That's
It's Township Park.
property?
Yes.
The one site and the other site don't cover each other?
No, they're nowhere near each other, but they cover two distinct areas that have difficulties with cellular and emergency communications.
Anyone else have a question right at the moment?
I just wanted to clarify, you said when you gave your presentation back in 2016 that the
Yes.
county was going to, you can't speak for the county now, obviously, but that the county was going to do this, or I mean, what exactly was the county going to do? I mean, how involved would they be in this process if you were putting up these towers? What would the county's role be, and what would they contribute financially?
If the county decided to participate in a cooperative effort with the township, they would work with the township to provide whoever's going to put the tower up and pay for the tower, to give public safety the top 20 or 25 feet because that's what's needed. And at that time, it would also be in the agreement where the tower provider would install the antennas and provide the cable and bring everything down to the base of the tower. At that point, the county would then have to provide the receiver equipment and the lightning protection and so forth, and also the ongoing cost of the RTNA circuit or T1 circuit back to the 911 center. And those are recurring costs which are pretty expensive. You're talking $400 to $500 to $600 a month, up to $1,000 a month, just for those circuits. So back then, those were the prices. So a radio receiver now costs you around $25,000. So, but it's all for naught unless there's a high place to put this stuff. So,
Did you have a CapEx number for each site? Your capital expenses?
this, well, at the time you're talking back in 2016, it was probably around $35,000 or $40,000 per site to put the equipment up.
To put the tower up?
No, not the tower, no. The county would not, the county only owns 3 towers. Most of the county's tower sites are on either lease sites or they're put up at fire stations, police stations, things like that.
But do you have any idea what it would cost to put the tower up
You're talking probably half a million to $750,000.
for each tower?
Yes.
Okay, so we're $1.5 million to $2 million a tower with
Yes.
today's prices.
Yes.
And that.
I have one more question. You mentioned in your 2016 report that these were 2 of the sites that needed extra cellular activity or whatever. Were there others?
Not really. We had gotten reports and we had gone out and tested, and those were the areas that we found that were really deficient, those 2 particular areas. So those were the ones that needed the attention.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, I have a question. You said the proposal was 2016 that you made it to Radnor Township?
Made it to the commissioners, yes.
Yes. Has technology advanced from 2016 to the current?
Not really. The county's basically on the same radio system they were back then. They haven't added any microwave sites, so there's no way to beam a microwave signal from that site back to one of our microwave sites. So really, the system and the network hasn't changed since then. So the 500 analog system is a legacy system. It works, but there is no newer technology that's going to be able to lower the cost or things like that. It is what it is. So it hasn't changed since then.
Bob
Mr.
Z
Chairman.
made a reference that some of the other options were not feasible. Could you go in depth about that being what's not feasible?
Yeah, they were talking about pole top units and microcells. Microcells will work for cellular carriers, but they're only going to cover a marginal area. Microcells are not going to work for emergency services because emergency services, they are in lower frequencies, and it's not going to give you the coverage on a pole top unit that you would have on a tower-based unit. So yes, microcells will work, and they're going to cover a very small area for cell carriers. You're going to have a lot of them to cover that entire Willows area, and you're going to need connectivity back to the backhaul or the backbone of the cellular carrier system. So they looked at pole top units, they looked at street lights that have embedded cellular antennas in them and receivers and transmitters. But all that stuff is cellular. It has really nothing to do with emergency communications. If you're talking about the 500 megahertz radio system, you need height and you need high antennas, which is going to be able to give you coverage. So, yeah, the feasibility for emergency services is not a low antenna, not in those 2 areas. It's not going to give you any coverage at all there.
Is there a cost differential?
Oh, extremely, yes. When you're talking, it's much more expensive to put an antenna on a tower than it is on a pole top unit. You've got lightning protection. It has to be enhanced because the higher you are, the more susceptible to lightning strikes. You have to make sure your grounding systems are in place. You have to make sure that You know, there's a lot more coax cable that has to be run up a 100-foot table than a 100-foot tower than a pole top unit. So yes, the cost is greatly increased when you're talking about a tower. But you spend the money to get the coverage. It's all about the coverage. So, these little microcells and all may work okay for cellular, but, you know, not going to give you a very broad coverage, even for cellular.
Thank you.
When you made the presentation in 2016 to the council, did they vote?
I don't believe it ever got to a vote, no. It was discussed and dropped.
So basically, is it still tabled? Or is it just gone?
I believe it's no longer under consideration. It was also presented at 2 different occasions to the Parks Board in which they did make recommendations. They voted in the affirmative twice to recommend to the Board of Commissioners.
And the would you refresh our recollection? You did say the Board of Commissioners voted not to have any more cell towers on park property?
That's correct.
So unless the Board of Commissioners goes in another direction, this is not a feasible solution to the issue.
That's correct.
Have you looked at other land that's a potential, that may be private land?
We've spoken to private landowners. We've sent cellular carriers to the property owners around there. Some of the owners have declined to be able to put it there just because of the space requirements there. They just don't want to put it within that tight of a residential area. One of the larger landowners, it came to end of negotiations because they wanted 3 on their property, not just 1. So that's why the negotiations broke down on that one. Again, typically the conversation was you would think of the gray ugly pole as you would think about a cell tower. The proposals were that you wouldn't even know that there was a tower there. One looked like a barn with a stable. One was a flagpole. There were other ones that were the technology to disguise these have changed quite a bit. The concern is public safety. I know there were a lot of accusations made. It's all about the money. It's all about public safety. Really the concern is because, again, with all the trails that are being proposed for the area, now with the mansion being redone now, I know the members of the Willows Park Preserve are concerned that there's no cellular coverage there as well, and those on the trail. So that's the concern is, but primarily it's the emergency services personnel. Also, I know Public Works with the events there, it's very difficult to be able to communicate amongst staff down there because you don't have coverage. So that's a major concern is public safety.
Have there been any public safety incidents? Adverse?
Not that we're aware of, but again, we don't want to, we know we have an issue that's down there.
Not that we should be waiting for something to happen
Absolutely.
before we do something.
Absolutely.
But just as a matter of record.
Right. We have not had anything occur as of today's date.
Just, Bob, the site that's closest to 476, that land is not town land, is that correct?
It is Radnor Township property.
It is, okay.
There was actually a homeowners association property that we had referred the carrier to, and they did have conversations with the homeowners association, but they were not happy with the dollar amount. It came down to dollars and cents, so that's why that did not proceed any further.
Brian? Bob? John?
Just to ask again, I think this was asked before, but as far as the technology is concerned, I would have to think that this is a problem that's not unique to Radnor Township. Is there any Vince, that you're aware of any technology that on the horizon or that's employed alternative to putting up a large tower in these kinds of circumstances that might work? I know you talked about the technology that would not work or would be cost prohibitive, but is there anything coming down the pike that would appear to be a potential alternative?
Unfortunately, no. The 500 megahertz analog radio system, like I say, is a legacy system. It's been around for years and years and years. And the equipment hasn't changed. Although, yes, there are digital radio systems, and I'm sure that somewhere down the road the county will migrate to a digital radio system. But right now, the analog system has been in place since 1992, when the county went to that system. And you know, other than buying new transmitters and receivers, there is no technological way to improve the signal unless you put up an antenna in a high place and a receiver and a connection back to the 911 center. So that's the only way to accomplish what you need to do.
To follow up on the questions, are there other municipalities that are using different technology than the one that we employ in Delaware County?
No. Oh, other counties? Yes. In Chester County and Montgomery County, they use a 700-800 megahertz trunked radio system that's digital. That requires even more towers and more equipment out as far as infrastructure is concerned to bring that signal back. The higher the frequency, the more sites you need and the more equipment you need out on the street to be able to bring that signal back. The lower the frequency, the less equipment you need. That's the rule of thumb. So, yes, other equipments do, other counties do have other systems, and Delaware County will possibly be migrating to that system sometime in the future. It's very expensive. There's talk now of, in the pre-planned sessions, of possibly moving in that direction sometime in the future, but like I say, I can't give you any particulars on that, when that's even going to happen.
But you're saying that technology would also require towers. I mean, we wouldn't want to be in a situation where you put up a couple towers and then the technology changes and they're effectively obsolete. I mean, that's not going to be the case.
Not necessarily obsolete. What happens is that when you change radio systems like that and you go from an analog system to a digital system, what happens is you need much more infrastructure in the street to be able to provide what we call in-building coverage. So anybody can go out and get on a 25-watt mobile and talk back to the radio room, no problem. But when you go out and you put a portable with 4 watts on your hip and you go into a house or into a building and then you try to talk back, that's an entirely different thing. You must provide adequate radio coverage to give the police and the fire and the EMS people the ability to go into a house and talk back. Yes, there's many different technologies out there that are improving that, but not on the system. There's no technologies on the system we have or that Delaware County uses to be able to do that, other than to put up more receivers and wired connections back to the 911 center. There are things like vehicle repeaters where an officer, when he goes into a house, keys up his mic, and his mic actually talks to his police car that's running outside, and then the police car broadcasts the signal back to the infrastructure. Those technologies are used by Pennsylvania State Police in their cars, and like I say, that's one of the options that the county may have going into the future to employ something like that, but right now that's not in place anywhere around here other than PSP. So yes, the other counties do use new digital radio systems. Delaware County uses an analog T-band 500 megahertz system. So the only way to improve the coverage is to add antennas and infrastructure.
And just to add to Steve's comments, this will be something that the local police departments will be working with Delcom in the school districts on emergency security responses in those types of situations, that to make sure that within school buildings that there can be communications between Delcom, the police officer, and within the school buildings in case it's ever needed, that you can communicate within buildings.
Talking about the school systems, are all of our school systems covered by the existing infrastructure?
They are.
What would you like us to do to help resolve this?
I think at the next meeting that you have is we will go and get all the information that was presented. I think the recordings that were done, I think would be good to be able to hear those in those particular areas, to be able to hear the actual calls that went out. And we'll bring a lot of that information back to you because we had talked about, and Steve had, because one of the previous commissioners had talked about the fiber optics, to be able to run a fiber optic ring back to Delcom to actually be able to resolve that issue and the expense of running fiber all the way back to the main hub of what that expense would be, and that was very, very costly. But to be able to lay out all of what has been done to this point, I think it'd be good to be able to have that information to you, and all that past history I think would be good for you, and then a lot of the questions you've asked to be able to get some of that information back for you as well. Then even some of the conversations I've had with some of the micro cell people that have talked about, you know, overall township where they could place these, but in some of these weaker areas, how it still needs that backbone up to a major antenna to be able to get out of some of these particular areas. That, as Steve talked about, it does help in a lot of different areas, but it still needs that backbone to be able to get that major signal out, but it doesn't help with the emergency services communications. If I can just add one more point, we did speak with the county on April 25th, and they just got the go-ahead to explore some options to upgrade their existing radio system, but it's going to take years for them to be able to get through that process. So this is something that, again, they're just getting their feet going on this. So they are working on that.
Steve,
Go ahead.
Steve, my concern is what Brian Kirby referenced, which is you're saying that the only option is cell towers, yes?
No.
Okay.
No, the other option would be is a large antenna that would sit back there. That would work as well, but you'd have guide wires that would come off of that antenna. So just so that you would have a large antenna that would sit back there. So that is the other option, or a fiber system that could be set up. That would be another way you could do that.
There are three types of antennas. There's a guide, GUYED antenna, which is a tall, skinny antenna with a bunch of guide cables that come down. They take up a lot of room, a lot of area, because you need the real estate there to be able to put the guide wires. Then you have a monopole, which is a single pole, large diameter pole, which goes up. Then you have a lattice tower. A lattice tower is a three-legged tower with lattice work in between. Those are the three basic types of towers. Most of your cell carriers now are using monopoles because they don't require a lot of real estate. They require footings in the ground, and basically they can put 100 foot or 125 foot up. That's basically the limit you can go with a monopole. But there are many different types of towers. There are many different tower disguises that are out there now to look like trees, and like Mr. Z said, flagpoles, barns, things like that. So basically, as long as that antenna sits in a high place, wherever it is, basically you can't put it in a tree, obviously, but you need a sturdy structure to be able to install the antenna, and then you have to have the building at the base of the tower to house the equipment. Most cell sites have all that there because your cell carriers are going to come in, and if they're going to erect a site, let's say AT&T is going to put a site up, well, there's a lot of prep work that has to be done. They actually prepare the surface of the ground. They actually have to put footers in. They have to put a halo around, cables buried in the ground around the site for lightning protection. And then the tower goes up. But then if there's going to be buildings or structures there to house the equipment, then the building goes in. The building has to be air conditioned, has to be heated. There has to be utilities put in and things like that. And then usually the area is landscaped and it's stoned to prevent grass from growing. It's a whole big process that has to be done. But your tower companies and your cell providers usually do all that work to get a site up. So that's the normal process. The emergency services part would happen during the initial negotiations. Whoever's going to pay for the tower, whoever's going to put the tower up, if it's on, like, say, Township's property or somebody else's property, the agreement would have to be made beforehand to provide public safety with a certain portion of that tower, and usually it's at the top, which is going to give you the most coverage. And then while the tower people are there, they install the antennas, they install the cable, and then the county or the township would come in after that's all done and hook up their equipment and set up the utilities and so forth. And obviously, there's electric bills that have to be paid and connectivity bills back to, for that radio circuits or the telephone circuits to take that signal back to the 911 center or back to the township here at Ivan Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions from the audience or comments from the audience? From our committee? Two things then I would suggest. We set a meeting based upon, people's various schedules. I think probably the most practical would be in September. We meet, Jim, on the third Wednesday, which is our scheduled time.
Your next scheduled meeting is for October.
But we can have a special meeting. In
Move
fact,
to
let's
September.
keep the October meeting as a regular meeting, and then we'll schedule this one as a special meeting, which we'll devote just to this topic. That the committee is in concert with that? We okay with that? Yes. Okay. So then we'll do a special meeting on this on September. We'll have our regular meeting in October to handle our normal business. Any information that you can get to the committee before that time would be helpful for us to do some prep before we get there. If it's Steve or Bob, whoever's going to be spearheading it from that, I think I would like to sit down with them beforehand, work out the agenda, work out the presentation so that we make sure that we've covered it and give the committee the kind of information and background that we have. Any of the committee members that have ideas about how we should proceed, please get in touch with me. I'll give you my cell phone number after the meeting. Oh, you can. Oh, I won't go in one of those. I'll text you before then. So we set up a process before we have the meeting, just so that it's just not ad hoc. All right. Anything else to come before the committee? Well, thank you, everybody, very much for coming out. Beautiful summer evening. Enjoy the rest of it. Thank you very much. We stand adjourned.